We have covered a powerful journey across today's sessions, from understanding how data helps anticipate customer behavior to delivering real time personalized experiences, to rethinking discovery in an AI driven search landscape, and building trust through transparent and responsible AI. Each conversation has added a new layer to how modern marketing operates. And now we arrive at a challenge that connects all of it: attribution. Because across every campaign, every interaction, and every customer journey, one question continues to shape decisions. What actually drives impact? Which touchpoints influence outcomes? Where should you invest more? And how do you measure success across increasingly complex multi channel experiences? This is where AI is transforming attribution, bringing in deeper visibility, smarter models, and a more complete view of the customer journey. In this session, the attribution problem, solving marketing's oldest headache with AI, we'll explore how organizations are tackling this challenge and building more accurate, insight driven measurement challenges. To explore that, I'm handing it over to Sonal Nagpal, an accomplished product marketing manager specializing in product positioning, GTM strategy, and AI driven marketing initiatives that help businesses transform complex technologies into impactful growth opportunities. She'll guide today's panel. Over to you, Sonal.
Thank you, Jaskaran. Hi, everyone. I'm Sonal, and I'm really excited to welcome you all to today's session: Attribution Problem, Solving Marketing's Oldest Headache with AI. Now, honestly, if there's one conversation I keep hearing again and again while working with marketing and revenue teams, it's this: what actually influenced the deal? Not just what generated the check, the click, or what actually filled the form, but really moved the buyer. And I think most marketers can relate to this. You launch campaigns, pipeline comes in, the number looks good. But then you walk in the stakeholder meeting, and suddenly the conversation becomes, okay, what actually drove the revenue? And the truth is, the buyer's journey today are messy. People consume content anonymously. They hear about you in communities. Some shares your webinar in Slack, listen to podcasts, content written on LinkedIn, talk to peers, and then maybe convert through a retargeting ad. So attribution has become a lot more complicated and simply tracking clicks and forms. That's exactly why I'm excited for today's discussion, because we are going beyond dashboards and talking about how AI helping marketers make smarter decisions in the world where customer journey is increasingly invisible. And to help us unpack this, I'm joined by two incredible experts. First, I'm excited to welcome Nick Bennett, founder of NB Marketing, where he helps B2B companies build modern GTM strategies that actually drive pipeline. With 15 years of experience, Nick is specially known for his work around demand generation, creator led marketing, and multi channel growth strategies that reflect how buyers actually buy today. Nick, great to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
And also joining us is Rob Young, Global CMO at Lokthread GRC and founder and CEO of Marketing HQ. Rob brings more than 26 years of experience across technology and marketing leadership, from IT operations in the Air Force to advising global technology leaders and leading marketing at IBM Security. One thing I really appreciate about Rob's experience is how practical and business focused it is, especially when it comes to connecting marketing activities to actual revenue outcomes. Rob, welcome. We are so glad to have you here.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Wonderful. Let's just jump right in. Rob, let me start with you. With the decline of third-party cookies, how is customer journey tracking becoming more fragmented and complex for marketers?
Yeah, so I'd say that the cookie problem is It's real, but it's a symptom. It's not the cause, right? I mean, the buyer journey was already becoming invisible before cookies declined. Dark social was already happening. Peer recommendations have been around a long, long time. Community influence, and none of that was ever tracked. So I think cookies just made the gap more obvious, but the fragmentation was always there. We just had a false sense of coverage, I think. And here's the thing, you don't have to see everything to know whether your marketing is working or not. We've never have been able to do that, and we never will be able to do that. And even if you were to argue that we could, I think it would be a fool's errand to spend a lot of time doing that. It's not to say that you shouldn't understand to a degree what investments you're making and how that is contributing to the business, but to get into so much into every single touch for every single contact and how they're going, I don't think you'll be able to do that, and I don't think it would be a good use of resources. Now that said, because you can't see every single channel and every single action within it, it's kind of one of these things where you have to place bets and you have to watch to see. It's kind of like the saying, a rising tide lifts all boats. If you have the right mix, then you'll see that those tides rise. For an example is, I remember I've killed off channels before, like search, for example, because of lack of last touch attribution, only to find out afterwards that it brought down conversions on LinkedIn. Wouldn't not necessarily tied those two things together, but apparently people who were seeing us via relevant search terms in search were then going and looking us up on LinkedIn. So when I killed off search because I wasn't getting any last touch attribution, it ended up impacting my conversions on LinkedIn. And there was a report recently that came out, I think it was Dream Data, that backed this up. They said something like nearly, I think it was 1 in 5 closed deals included a LinkedIn company page view. And when that signal was present, the time to close dropped to around 90 days. And yet most teams still kind of treat that as a vanity metric, but it's not, it's buyer intent. So for me, that's kind of where it sits with me. I have a mix. I take bets, I place bets, and then I make sure that those bets lift all boats.
That's such an important perspective. And I really liked what you just said, that cookies didn't create the visibility problem, they simply exposed it. I think we as marketers just had a sense of false visibility for a very long time. Nick, this connects perfectly to the next challenge I want you to bring in. Why do traditional attribution models like last click fail in a hyper-personalized and multi-channel environment?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, last click was built for a buying journey that no longer exists in my mind. And I'm happy for people to debate me on that. But one channel, one touch, one conversion, like that world is gone. Today, a buyer might see your brand in a podcast, hear about you from a peer at a conference, especially with like the number of conferences that are back these days. IRL, like people love being in person again. It's fantastic. They might be engaging with your content on LinkedIn for 3 months, attend a webinar, and then click a retargeting ad. So last click gives 100% of the credit to the retargeting click, the podcast, the pair, the webinar, they get 0. So what happens when you manage to that data? You cut things that aren't converting, you defund the podcast, you cut the event budget, you scale the retargeting, and then 6 months later, you wonder why pipeline got thin and your brand feels invisible to the market. So the model doesn't just give wrong answers, it actively punishes the right decisions. And anything that builds early stage awareness or trust, it gets flagged as expensive, unattributable, especially in this economy. And the marketers running those programs spend all of their time defending spend instead of improving it. Last click also has a time problem. It can only measure what it can see in a trackable window. So basically, if someone has been reading your newsletter for a year before they raise their hand, last click has no idea. It starts the clock the day they click the link. Everything before that is invisible. And if you're in B2B like all of us, you've got a buying committee problem on top of that. So you're not selling to one person. You've got procurement, you got finance, you got the end user, the champion. They're all consuming different content at different times through different channels. Last click picks one person's final click and calls that the whole story. But at the end of the day, it's not even close.
That's such a strong point, especially the data that last click ends up rewarding only the final interaction while ignoring everything that built trust before it. Rob, I would love your perspective here too, because I know you look this from both marketing as well as executive side.
Yeah, so I think that last click, I mean, it doesn't fail just because it was poorly designed. I think it fails because the buyer journey simply moved way before it. It's more of a channel shift problem, not so much a measurement problem. I mean, the model, it was built for a linear kind of trackable world, and that world just no longer exists. So I think, as kind of was already pointed out, last click gives, sort of 100% credit to the channel that showed up for like the last 30 seconds and gives 0 credit to the 6 months of relationship building that made that buyer ready to convert in the first place. So for me, it's not something I pay a ton of attention to. It's just one sort of wave, if you will, in that tide that I mentioned that has to raise all boats.
I think that perfectly captures why attribution feels broken today. So naturally, that brings us to AI, because this is where a lot of organizations are now looking for answers, not necessarily for perfect attribution, but for better visibility and decision making. Rob, let me ask you this next one. How are AI-driven approaches like marketing mix model and data-driven attribution helping uncover the invisible customer journey?
Okay, sure. So I think the marketing mix model is having a resurgence as cookie-based tracking, for example, breaks down. In particular for large enterprises with years of data, it adds real value. Again, it might be debatable, but for me, my opinion is for most B2B companies, especially early stage, in particular early stage, it's not really practical. You really need 2 to 3 years of historical data across multiple channels for that model to be meaningful. And most early stage B2B teams just don't have that. So what I've found to be more helpful for me, and I spend a lot of my time these days over the past several years in early stage B2B. So I'm looking more at using AI more at a granular level. So I'll give an example. So one of the things that I've found value doing is loading Gong transcripts from our sales calls, ICP definitions that we have, marketing and sales narratives, our cross-channel engagement history, and our multi-touch patterns into the model and asking what sequences of interaction precede close won deals. That's something the teams can do right now. We're doing it and it gives some great insights. It won't give you a perfect attribution number, but it will tell you which combinations of touches correlate with your best customers and your fastest deal and your highest win rates. I also like to use AI to kind of connect the dots even more around sort of ICP, positioning and messaging. Again, our rep call scripts will go in there, pipeline data and win-loss data to surface sort of useful correlations, including like which reps have the best success with which types of customers coming in on which specific messages. In some cases, you may even find that you want to move to a model where your reps aren't assigned necessarily just on territory, but rather they're assigned based on where they have better success, where their skills are better positioned in terms of closing deals. You can get those types of insights by doing that. So the goal for me isn't about perfect attribution. It's really about directional accuracy and good enough like to tell where you should put more money and also where to pull back. I mean, for me personally, I'd rather have a 70% accurate model that I'm acting on now and using than a 95% accurate model that I'm still building and we're waiting for it to be perfect before taking action.
I really like that realism in that answer. because I think there's a tendency in the market right now to position AI as it's going to magically solve attribution overnight. And what really powerful is the ability to identify patterns at scale. Which touch combination correlate with higher win rates, faster pipeline velocity, or stronger closed-won outcomes? Nick, I would love your take on how marketers should actually use these insights. How
Yeah,
should
I mean,
marketers,
oh, sorry.
sorry,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
how
Sorry.
should marketers use AI-driven attribution insights to make better budget allocation and channel investment decisions?
So I think like the first thing that you have to do is change the question that you're asking. Like most teams are saying like what channel drove the conversion, but that's the wrong question. The right one is what combination of touches moved the deal. And when you look at like those multi-touch patterns instead of kind of like the single channel credit, the answer is usually pretty obvious, like fast. Like you find 2 to 3 things that show up consistently and close won deals. Maybe it's like webinar like this and direct outreach. Maybe it's event attendance before a demo request. Like those combos matter more than any single channels, like individual numbers. Once you know the combos, you kind of fund the system. You're not funding the channels in isolation, which I think is still a bigger, like that's another whole conversation. But like most teams optimize at the channel level, like paid is up, events are flat, let's shift budget to paid. That logic breaks if events are the first step that makes paid work though. You can't cut one without hurting the other. And I think like the most practical move is to look at win rates by source combination. So if deals that touched an event before a demo close at say 40% versus 20% for pure digital, you don't need a perfect model to act on that. That's kind of like a budget signal. So protect the events budget. And honestly, like most useful output from AI kind of driven attribution isn't where to add budget, it's where to stop spending. So channels that consistently show up in lost deals or slow moving pipeline, like cut those regardless of what last click says. The model tells you what to kill before it tells you what to scale. I think the trap is waiting for like the perfect data, kind of like what Rob said, like waiting for the perfect data before you make a move. Like you're never going to get perfect. Like get to, like Rob said, 70%, like get confident, start making decisions, ship the imperfect version, use it, and then you improve it as you go.
I agree, 100%. The shift from channel thinking to journey thinking is such a valuable takeaway because buyers don't experience marketing channel by channel. They experience sequences. And I think what's really interesting about AI-driven attribution is that it helps uncover combinations of touches consistently shows up in successful deals. Rob, I know you have strong perspective on the budgeting side of this. Would you like to add something?
I do actually. So, and maybe it'll be controversial, I don't know. But I will say I do have strong feelings about budget because I feel like it's a place where marketers, I would say for worse, put themselves in more of a defensive posture, and it can kind of undermine the marketing function because they become sort of a cost center. So how I like to do it is I like to structure it in a way where I have built a deep understanding of our marketing CAC first, our customer acquisition costs. Then it's not marketing going and asking for budget. It's about the business saying, we need X amount of revenue, and marketing saying, okay, well, that cost X amount to deliver. Then it's really up to the business to decide whether they want to make that investment or not. So it sort of reframes the whole conversation. So that's how I like to do it, okay? In practice, I do look at I track cost per outcome by channel. So what did we spend in events? What did we spend in digital? Okay. In this type of conversation around budget, I'm not looking at the very granular, like which events, which digital channel. I just look at the programs as a whole, the digital program and the event program. And then I divide that by how many MQLs, SQLs, SQOs, and close won deals we produce from each of those. So it's pretty simple math, right? I just divide that cost by the number of the MQLs and SQLs through close won deals we got. Then that tells me which channel is getting more or less efficient over time without needing perfect attribution. And this allows me to go back to the business and say, okay, I'll ask the question often, like in multiple times. Let me know what the all-in number for the business is. What are we trying to hit for ARR this year? What's the multiple on pipeline that you're going for? Is it 3, 4, 5%? What percentage do you want marketing to contribute to that? Is it 40, 50, 60%? And then I go back and I'll take either historical data that I have based on, again, the math I just said, to figure out what is the cost of those customers. What is my customer acquisition cost? And then say, okay, this is the amount of budget that would be required. This is the amount of investment that would be required for me to deliver that much revenue. So that's how I handle it. It flips the table a little bit. Instead of marketing being the one asking, it's actually the business asking marketing. We want this much, and us coming back and saying, okay, here's the cost for that. And then the business deciding whether they want to pay that cost or not.
That is incredibly relevant, especially right now when marketing leaders are under pressure to justify every dollar spent. And I think what you said about building a credible directional story is so important, because sometimes the CFO is not looking at a perfect attribution dashboard. They are looking for confidence. They want to understand, are the win rates improving? Is pipeline quality improving? Deals moving faster? Or is there any marketing attribution or marketing contribution to revenue outcomes? And also, those signals often tell a much bigger story than last click attribution ever could. For our final question, I want to touch on something every marketing team struggles with: balancing precision with actionability. Nick, let me start with you. How do teams balance accuracy versus actionability when working with modern attribution models?
I mean, I think we talked about, Rob mentioned like perfect attribution. It's a trap. But I mean, you can spend 6 months getting your data clean and your model tuned to like a good point, but like you're still not it's not going to help you make a single budget decision faster. Like, here's what it actually looks like in practice, like what I've done recently. So like a team spends a quarter kind of like aligning on their CRM data, cleaning up UTM parameters, mapping every touch point. The model's almost ready. Meanwhile, they're still running budget decisions off of last click because the new model isn't like done yet. So quarter ends, they made 0 changes. The broken model's still driving the bus. That's the real cost of chasing perfect, I think. Like, you default back to the thing that you know is wrong while you wait for the thing that's supposedly right. I think the goal is directional accuracy. So good enough to tell where to put more money and where to pull back, not certainty, direction. So like, you don't need to know that events drove 34.7% of pipeline. Like, you need to know that deals touching an event close at a higher rate, so you protect that budget when finance comes asking. So treat the model like a feedback loop, not really a final answer. Like, run it, act on it, what it tells you, see what happens, adjust, and then that cycle compounds. So 6 months of imperfect decisions made faster beats 6 months of no decision every time.
I honestly think a lot of teams in the audience probably needed to hear that, because marketers can spend months trying to perfect attribution models, cleaning data, finding tuning systems, and debating methodologies. And meanwhile, decision making slows down completely. The idea of directional accuracy is incredibly powerful, because at the end of the day, attribution should help teams make smarter decisions faster, not create another 6-month internal project. Rob, I would love your closing perspective on this too.
Yeah, so I mean, it goes back to what I mentioned earlier. I think about it's to me, a big part of it is on the budget side of things, to stop defending it and start defining it. And to do that, you have to understand your customer acquisition costs cold. You just have to. Because then it's not about marketing asking for money. It's about the business deciding how much revenue it wants to buy. And that's a fundamentally different and more powerful position to be in. Now, when it comes to, okay, how are you doing sort of the math behind telling the business how much it's going to cost for them to buy that revenue from marketing? This is where I think that you have to do sort of a little bit more of a blended approach versus attribution at the channel level. Because number one, it's not doable. it's again a fool's errand to try to go and do that, right? Because so much is happening where in places you can't see. That's one reason to not do it that way. The other one is that the CFO, CEO, the other executives where you're having this conversation with, you're going to lose them in all of that. So you really have to bubble it up and do it blended. So a blended CAC, and if you do want to segment it out and say at least do it by digital and events, that's okay. I think anything beyond that, anything lower than that, you start to lose them and it starts to become less meaningful. So that's how I handle it. I don't do it on last touch. I take all of what's going on inside of marketing. I try to bucket in events in a digital bucket. I take that blended, do the division on that to give the business an idea of what it's going to cost for customer acquisition through each of those channels, and then simply say how much of that do you want, and it's up to them to purchase that from marketing. So that's how I handle it, and I found that it puts marketing in a much better posture than kind of, we want to spend this in LinkedIn, we want to spend this in Google, we want to spend this over here, and here's how many clicks we think we're going to get and how many MQLs we think we're going to get from this. It becomes very convoluted and people start to lose trust in it. Plus, you can't make guarantees like that. So I think it's directional. I think it's blended, but it is based in math. And if you don't have the historical is ideal. What have your customer acquisition costs been in those programs historically? But if you don't have it, then at least lean on industry benchmarks to kind of fill any gaps that you might have.
That's such a strong note to end on. You have
Sure.
something else to add on? Sorry.
I was just going to say one other thing to be, I think, mindful of is sometimes it's also, how team, like what is getting credited inside of a company. And this can be challenging, because, the rep is kind of getting, the commission on closing the deal. Search could be getting the credit for like the last touch. And you start to have all of these kind of competing forces of where this thing came from. And then when that happens, you can kind of like brand, for example, they and that whole thread, they kind of lose spend. They get cut because they're not kind of showing up in that conversation. So I do think that it's important for marketing leaders it's not going deep into those channels, but at least making it obvious to the business that you have a presence in terms of setting those sales teams up for success based on the blended sort of program outcomes that you're delivering, right? Because otherwise you can get lost in the mix, right? They can not, you don't want to kind of show so much of the trees, but rather the forest. But there is a little bit where you have to do show a little bit of the trees as well, especially when it becomes about brand. Because I think over the years, that term has become kind of, leadership can kind of have an allergic reaction to it. But you do have to make it a point to educate them on the fact of what I brought up earlier, where, it's that rising tides lift all boats. If you turn something off that is brand related, you might very well start to see where you're having conversions drop off, where that last touch is happening will start to drop off unknowingly. And there has to be a level of trust there that they have confidence in your ability and your knowledge in this space to allow you to do that. Otherwise, what ends up happening is you start hollowing out your pipeline. And because of the sales cycle, it might not show up for 6 to 9 months, but it will show up. And then it's kind of like too late, right? Because now you've lost an entire sales cycle. And I've been in situations where I've had both. I've had situations where there was trust in marketing. They understood that. And as they let me invest in brand properly, even though we didn't have last touch attribution, and all the tides did rise, we were delivering on what we said our customer acquisition cost would be from marketing. So everybody was happy. There were times where there was questions around it, like, no, I think we should kill it off. I don't think it's working correctly. 6 to 9 months later, we realized, oh gosh, like all these things that we weren't getting attribution on were actually getting us attribution in those other channels, we got to turn those things back on, but we lost an entire sales cycle, which is a painful and pricey lesson to learn.
Oh, that's really good that you have shared this with us, because I think we will also learn from your maths that you talked about, as well as the experience that you have just shared. It's really incredible, because we are also planning something new for our products or for our services. However, with your insights, I think we can again have a look back at that before planning something else. That's really insightful, Nick, honestly, Rob. Nick, I think there is a LinkedIn Live question. If we have time, we can just quickly take one of the questions for you. Okay, so the question here is, many organizations still struggle with siloed teams and disconnected data environments. How important is organizational alignment in building attribution strategies that are both accurate and actionable?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely important. It's like, I mean, it goes back to the whole marketing and sales thing, in which there's many other departments kind of involved in this, but like it's you can't do anything in silo anymore, because it's going to break at some point. And it's like, how do you work together? And it goes back to building relationships to kind of build all of those things up. But just like any program that you build, like marketing shouldn't be doing it alone. Like there should be other departments like ops and sales and finance involved as well. And I think it's all about like, how do you document a process that you can actually leverage? Because let's just say, you put something in place around this, it's awesome, and 1 month later you're not there. Like it's a lot of teams that I talk to like don't document the process of all of this and don't have a good kind of repository of like where they store it. And so a couple months later, they're back to square one. They're like, oh, I don't know, we had something, it worked okay, let's just start over. And it's a rabbit wheel that just keeps on kind of going. So I think just organizational alignment and just relationship building up and down within the organization and sideways is very important.
I actually agree with you. Attribution is just not a technology challenge. It's also an organizational and alignment challenge. That's so rightly said. Last question for you, Rob. I think this is the only question we are left with from the LinkedIn Live. As AI becomes more embedded in marketing analytics, what role should human judgment continue to play when interpreting attribution insights and making investment decisions?
Well, I think most probably know what my answer is going to be. I mean, humans have to be deeply involved in this, right? I mean, you have to understand, you're the one placing the bets, and you don't even know necessarily how that's going to work. So, everybody wants to play it safe, and I get it, especially in today's world. But I think that unfortunately in marketing in particular, it's caused us to be so risk adverse that we're afraid to try anything. And by playing it safe, we actually end up in a worse position, because we're only going where we think we're going to get conversions, and we only go where that last touch is going to be shown. And we're so afraid to go try something like a newsletter, or a sponsorship in a newsletter, or going on a podcast, because are we going to get attribution, or are we going to know where those? It's just so there's a lot of fear in marketing, and I wish that would change. Because you just can't operate from a place of fear and also be successful, because it just takes making bets that you just aren't going to know if they're going to work until you do them. So it's where, I mean, there's a pro and a con. I guess it depends on the way you're looking at it. Marketing is a science and it's an art. And if you're a marketing leader, you got to be good at both of those. You got to be willing to take some gambles, keep a very close eye on what's happening for sure, and be able to course correct if you see something trending in the wrong direction. But the playing it safe to the point to where you're only going in channels where you think you're gonna get perfect attribution, or get somebody that's already down at the bottom of the funnel and just get conversions, I think that's a very limited play that's going to give you very limited success.
I agree, especially the marketing around us that people are doing, competitive marketing that is too much in the market. And we need to actually work on that, do something extraordinary, not the normal one. Nick, do you want to add something here?
No, I think he summed it up perfectly. Yeah, I'm complete agreement.
Okay, great. So my biggest takeaway from today's session is this. Attribution today is less about finding one perfect source of truth and more about building enough confidence to make smarter, faster decisions. Thank you so much, Nick and Rob, for such an insightful conversation. And thanks to everyone who joined us today. We hope this session gave you more practical and modern perspective on attribution in an AI-driven world.
Thank you to our panelists, Rob and Nick, who presented some powerful thoughts on how attribution plays a big role in decision making and how AI makes it easier to credit the right channel. Now, I'm going to hand it over to Devanshi for the closing note. Over to you, Devanshi.